Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, PBM, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Marks Paneth, Capital One Bank. Additional funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Amerant Bank, Bank of America, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, People's United Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, and these friends. One year into the pandemic, are things getting better? Will the vaccine help us? Will the restaurants open up? What's really going on? And where do you see opportunities when things get better? I don't have the crystal ball for this, so I've invited certain friends to provide their insight on their thoughts of the market and the opportunities. My guests include Eli Weiss, who's the principal of Joy Construction, our banker, Ralph Bumbaka, who's the New York City market manager, market president for the TD Bank. And last but not least, my favorite guest, who's been on for over 25 shows since the inception, my friend Drew Naporn of the Marriott Restaurant Group, Bertard, Nobu, Tribeca Grill, and most of it all, a mensch.
Thank you.
So, Eli, you're the kid on the show, but you've been involved with lots of things over the last year, and you've been impacted rather heavily because of the pandemic. Let's talk about a little bit on the hospitality market, in the hotel market.
2020 got off to a strong start. January and February, which are typically weak years in the hospitality markets, were both strong years. And then as COVID became more prevalent and the shutdown happened in mid-March, things inevitably went off the cliff. I feel comfortable saying that New York City, which was one of the strongest hotel markets in the world, really became the epicenter for the weakness in the hospitality business. I mean, New York was a place that was benefiting from almost 70 million tourists. And so between the decline of business travel and tourism, you saw almost a complete drop in both occupancy at hotels and rates. For example, in January and February, our hotel portfolio performed over 90% and about mid to low $200 a night for the average daily rate. And we finished the year averaging about 30% occupancy with a rate under $100, which is just unprecedented for New York. So it was definitely a bleak year. I don't want to, single out the hotel business as the only business that was adversely impacted, but it is a very good and acute example of what the pandemic did to the hospitality business in New York City.
So here's the question. How do you adapt? Do you convert your hotel rooms into student housing? Do you convert them into residential markets? Do you make them small offices, co-sharing? How do you adapt? Because you have to pay the banks your loans, you have to operate efficiently, and you have to figure out what you're going to do in the future.
So, I'm a believer and an optimist that things will go back to some semblance of normal. We'll all have to make changes in the margins. I like to remind people that the hospitality business has been around for 2,000 years. There's a famous story of a couple trying to find a room on Christmas Eve, and they couldn't find a room because everything was occupied. So, I'd like to think that certain aspects of hospitality are not going to change, and there's no reason to change every hotel into a residential building or an affordable housing or supportive housing project. What I'd like to think is we're going to get our arms around this pandemic with a vaccine, with leadership, with management. We will make changes in the margins that reflect what we learned about the pandemic. Perhaps that means less public spaces, certain aspects of cleaning, certain aspects of design. But I'd like to think that the overall lifestyle that we've grown accustomed to in terms of hotels, travel, restaurants will come back and hopefully be stronger than ever.
Now, I mean, one industry that has been totally affected completely is the restaurant business. Drew, if the 67 million visitors don't come back, that's one point. The second point is if people don't go to work full time, that they're only working 3 days a week from the office, it's going to have an effect. How do you and members of the hospitality industry try to see what could be good for the future?
You know, Michael, there's a lot of mixed messages. At the beginning, when they first said it was going to be all right to open, but at a small percentage, and then in the future you'd open at a larger percentage, that was very hopeful. Then the PPP kicked in. That was very helpful because it started, 60% to payroll and rent. So 24 weeks. It was originally we weren't even open when we got the funds, and then they enlarged it to 24 weeks. Here's the bottom line. I'd rather err on behalf of safety. I'm the one that when this thing first happened, my manager came to me and said, the girls want to work from home. I go, what are you talking about? The girls want to work from home. That's ridiculous. Now, it's a total, I think about this thing totally different. I don't want anybody to get sick. I had the COVID. Luckily, I had a very mild version. My brother had the COVID. My brother almost died. He was sick as a dog. And right now I have people, I have a friend that's in the hospital, and I know people who've died. So, there is a certain amount of people, even if they open the restaurants, who won't go out because there's been so much mixed messaging. So Eli said it very clearly, very smart. Here's what has to happen. The vaccine has to start building our confidence back. And whatever percentage that they open, it's the cold weather now in New York City. So the people were eating outside until the weather got cold. Then these people have built all kinds of things to stay outside, but that's ridiculous. You don't want to eat in 30-degree weather or even colder. So my prediction is tomorrow, Cuomo's going to announce some kind of allowance for indoor dining in New York City. Good. And then it's going to be up to me. I have to cobble together a staff again because they've been out of work for over a month, and I'm not even sure I can find my people. But I have great confidence in New York that we're going to bounce back. And it might take a little more time. I will say to you, Michael, I've had tremendous cooperation from my landlords. I don't feel economic pressure. I might not reopen certain businesses. That's a reality. If I can't, I can't. But I'm going to sit this one out until it's safe to let our workers go back, until it's safe for the diners to go back. And then, and the vaccines, obviously, I think, thank God we got rid of Trump. He was a disaster. And I think we're in a good position now to go forward.
So now we go to the man with the money, okay? Okay, the individual who's putting out money. How's the bank adapting, okay? What are you thinking of doing these days?
We're an essential business. When the pandemic struck, we really had to shift our operating model to be able to protect our employees and still conduct business. One of our advantages throughout the 5 boroughs and certainly in the outer boroughs was the ability to use drive-up windows. And that was significant for us to stay connected to our customers. And then, of course, the support of the PPP, which was a tremendous source of liquidity for many of the small businesses and certainly the single individuals that have their own consulting businesses, or small practices and so forth. Being able to access that liquidity was so critical. So we were able to kind of transition our operating system to be able to handle a flood of applications. And I think we took in over 85,000 applications, a significant amount of money to put out. And so, I'm encouraged by this second round of PPP, the liquidity that's going into small businesses, because without that level of liquidity, it's going to be a challenge for us to move through a recovery. I'm encouraged by the vaccine, but we need that level of liquidity to stabilize these businesses that are struggling. And just recently, the SBA just expanded all of their programs, the 7A and the 504, and those will be critical sources of liquidity for businesses like Drew and like Eli's to access, to be able to grow their businesses and or get them just back up and running.
So here's the question for Eli and Drew. Did you take round one on PPPs, and are you applying for the second round on PPP? Eli?
So on some of our businesses, we did take PPP on some of the assets. Some of them are eligible for the second round. Hotels, obviously, and restaurants have an enhanced amount for the second round. Some of our entities that we did take for the first round, we don't see a need to take for the second round. They've stabilized to a point, but anything I think hospitality related would most likely benefit from the second round. I don't see that any hospitality business or restaurant has stabilized to the point where the second round wouldn't be appropriate for it.
Drew?
Yeah, I think it was administered quite well. Unfortunately, one size doesn't fit all. For instance, it's supposed to be 24 weeks, but it was 24 weeks from when you got the money. We got the money before we were even open. So it was really only applicable to us for about 16 weeks. That's number one. Number two, there is the forgiveness of this. If there's no forgiveness, I'm not taking it, because I spent about $1 million. And if I'm not forgiven that $1 million, I'm going to be in a worse situation. So I'm still waiting on the forgiveness aspect of it. But let's just say for a moment that it will be forgiven. So it's a godsend. We couldn't have done it the first time without it. And no business, especially my business, can operate at 25% capacity. I don't care what you say. I mean, this is crazy. But the weather warming up is going to be a good thing for the restaurant business, obviously. People, Michael, in New York, you couldn't put a table outside, and the city of New York was going to charge you thousands of dollars for that table. I'm talking about one table. So, the people like to put down de Blasio. He did a fantastic job in New York City, because in one day you went on online and you were able to serve your customers outside for several weeks. I mean, that was fantastic. And I think he's extended that. So that's going to be the case when they reopen, but the weather has to cooperate. But look, the returning to normalcy for us it's got to be at least 50%, because, not every restaurant is at full capacity. It's like the hotel business, you have a percentage of occupancy. So, but at least at 50%, we can make a go of it. That's essentially the situation.
So here's the point. You bring up the subject of forgiveness of the PPP. What about your landlords? Okay, how are your landlords reacting?
Michael, the landlords did terrific. You know why? Look, they gave us, let's just say they gave us $1 million, right? So 60% of the $1 million had to go to payroll. That was ascribed. So that didn't come to me. That went to my staff. The rest went to rent on the first round. The second round is going to be a little bit different. The rest went to rent. So even if we weren't operating, they got 6 months worth of rent from the PPP, because it was given money to us. Now, hopefully it's forgiven. It didn't come out of my pocket. It came out of the government's pocket. And I forwarded it to my landlord. Now, on the months that were closed and there's no PPP, I have landlords that are benevolent. They know I'm not making any money, so how can I pay them? But that's not the case across the board.
Eli?
I'm a landlord and an operator, and I can tell you that I think you have, in terms of the guests here, the whole ecosystem, right? So you have operators and landlords who come to realize that an empty business and an empty space generates nothing. And that behind those landlords, there are people like Ralph who have mortgages on these buildings. And I have to give credit to the financial and banking community. Most banks have been extremely willing to work together. I think the story that we'll all look back is very similar to the pandemic itself. We were all in this together. This was not pitting landlords against operators and operators against banks. Unlike 2008, where there seemed to be clear good guys and bad guys in that crisis, I think this one, there's no good guys and bad guys. There's just all of us trying to get through it to the other side. And I think that's created a very different business environment.
So here's my question. Are there opportunities for, let's say, to go to landlords and say, you know what? You have a vacant space. It's better to have somebody over there. You used to have a kitchen over there. Give me a special rent for the next 18 months, and I'll try to open up. Drew, have you seen that opportunity?
Honestly, I think that's a bit of a fairy tale.
But that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, first of all, I think New York is different than a lot of places, Michael. That's one thing. There are some people that are going to take advantage of this opportunity. I'm 65. The rest, my first restaurant I still have 35 years later. So I'm a survivor. I've hung in there, but I don't necessarily have the stomach to be innovative anymore. I don't have the drive that I had as a young person to make money. So out there probably are some young people. The opportunities are going to be there, certainly. But just in the direct answer to your question, I don't see what you're talking about.
See, I've heard that people have gone to some landlords, and the landlords are giving them what we call as a COVID deal. So for the next 12 to 18 months, the rent has been reduced significantly. Maybe it's on a percentage rent, and then it will change. Have you seen that, Ralph, with some of your clients?
Yeah, we're seeing that out in the market. Certainly the percentage of rents is there. And, which also is encouraging, what I've seen with many businesses is they've really honed in on their expenses and their working capital and exactly what they need and how to support their business. And I think it will propel them as we come out and recover, that they'll be even stronger and have a better footing within their business and take the advantage of growing or expanding their business.
Drew, you have downtown Manhattan locations. What happens if people don't return to work 100%? What if they're working on a 3-day period? And it's the same situation. Eli, you have a combination situation with your student housing. If people don't come back for student housing, how do we react if people aren't on 100%? As you just brought up, Drew, you can't make it on 25% of the restaurant. 50 is hard enough. How do you do it if the offices are vacant, or what's going on with that?
I was just going to say, I think people are dying to go out, but they want to go out safely. Even if there's less tourism, even if there's less people coming into work, and certainly I'm in a neighborhood, I have to draw the bees to the honey. I mean, I'm not, I went to Cornell Hotel School, and they said, how are you successful in business? Location, location, location. So I'm in the middle of no place. So I have to be really good to get people. But I believe, I've done it for 35 years plus. I'll get the people. It just has to be safe. And I'm less worried about the tourism. I'm less worried about the density. I'm more worried about people's confidence to go out and feel that they can be in a restaurant safely, that they can be, closer, than 6 feet and not feel worried that they're going to come down with some kind of a virus.
I think the key to normalcy is the first week of September and making sure that universities open, making sure that schools open, because that has a trickle down effect, right? Going to work, really, if you don't have children related to school, is purely company policy. But if you have a child who's 6 years old and needs to stay home in Zoom school, even if your office is open, you can't go. And so getting the schools back to stability, I think, is very crucial to all of this.
And Michael, I think, many employers were grappling with a shorter work week already. I think that, was kind of working itself through. So we've been experiencing that pre-pandemic. And I think it answered a lot of questions for firms, how they want to address that kind of a limited work schedule or flex work schedule for their employees. So I think as we approach that fall and the opening of schools and universities here, I think the volume will tick up to the point where we'll see some real business activities in many of our neighborhoods throughout the city.
Specifically with regard to TD, I mean, you have thousands of employees over here. Not all of your branches are open. When are you planning to change a little bit?
So all of our retail stores are open and fully staffed. The offices, we are at a work at home requirement for all employees until June, where we'll reevaluate it then at that point.
Eli, as a landlord of other property, okay, for retail properties, what are you doing to incentivize to get people to sign leases?
So signing new leases obviously is challenging unless it's a business that is unaffected by this, i.e. a supermarket, i.e. medical space. I sort of have shifted, and I think everybody in retail, even pre-COVID, was going through already part of a very, very large transformative industry, change. And so candidly, what I'm trying to do is attract tenants that I feel are what are quote unquote essential services. And that's not just COVID related, that's also related to what was going on with retail and shopping from home even before. So I'll take a medical tenant or a grocer at a lower rent rather than a traditional retailer that might be paying a higher rent, but my confidence in them being able to make it or not coming back for a concession in the near future is much lower. So I think it's really about being strategic, and I think it's also trying to understand and hope, right, which is what I truly believe, that this is a moment in time. Unfortunately, it's been a long time, but on a relative basis, it's not. This is a moment in time, and I'd like not to make all of my decisions from a business point of view and a personal point of view based on this pandemic. I mean, we do have a vaccine. The rollout's been challenging, but we'll get there. And I don't want, and I hope that all New Yorkers don't feel like we have to change all of our behaviors because of this. I remember in 2003, 2004, when the smoking ban came out, they said that bars and restaurants would cease to exist in New York. And I'm sure there was a dip and I'm sure there were changes, but people adapted. And, up until COVID, it was a very robust business. So I'm trying not to let what I think are, short-term implications fully dictate, my strategy on the long term.
To get people back to New York with regard to tourism, for people to return to New York living here, it's the subject of safety. Safety, I still think, is a major concern for people to be in New York.
I agree with you. I think New York is safer, but I think, when there's not a lot of street activity, there's opportunity for a lot of shenanigans. But I think New York can control, the crime situation. But first of all, there are cameras everywhere now. I mean, people have security cameras up. They're going to catch these people. New York is just so vibrant all the time, and it's going to come back. I'm just totally confident of that. And people are not going to be, I don't think people are going to be scared off because of the rumor that crime has increased. I haven't seen the statistics, but I don't believe it has.
You went to Cornell School of Hospitality. How do you say to somebody today, you should enter the field of hospitality?
I say you have to be patient because I think the hotel business, was booming prior to the pandemic. I think it'd be hard to try to tell somebody to stay in a room in a hotel, during the pandemic. But I think when this thing passes, it's going to be fantastic. I'm being bombarded now with a lot of emails about cruise ships and resort stays. I think people are really looking to turn the corner. I just, and then I think it's going to be, I think the economy and everything's going to boom, right? We have to get the safety issues because, when they talk about travel, you're talking about people who are in a country that might carry the virus to us. That's how we got it in the first place. They say, oh, well, we stopped travel from China. So what? They were coming in from Europe and they already were exposed to the virus, thousands and thousands of people. That's how it came to this country. So safety, I've been saying this the whole show, safety is the first and foremost thing we have to consider. But I think if things get back to where they were, it goes without saying that people will gravitate to our industry. Okay,
with like 30 seconds left, when will there be a level of normalcy in your mind, okay? Because part of we talk about the vaccine, but there are plenty of people who don't want to take the vaccine, okay? When do we see normalcy returning to New York City? Let's start with Ralph, the banker.
I think the critical component is what we were talking about before, employment, which will address some of the issues around safety and crime. And once employers start to bring back their employees here into the commercial spaces. It'll be a pickup for our retail businesses, and that's that level of normalcy. So I think we'll see that in late spring to carry us into the fall. And then, of course, the universities and schools are going to make a greater impact.
Eli?
I think summer, I think after July 4th, all of the dislocation with people's educational situations at home will be over. People will start using good weather as what we usually do, which is a chance to go out, feel optimistic, feel good, see friends. And I think that by after Labor Day, we'll have reached enough of a critical mass of vaccinations, with schools hopefully stabilizing, that we'll start to see normalcy.
Am I a 65-year-old optimist?
Yes, I heard Dr. Ja say that he's going to have a barbecue on July 4th without masks. So I think sometime around June, we'll be back to normal.
Okay. I'm back to normal with my friends. You know, we're not at the studio. We're working remotely, and we're doing a pretty good job. I'd like to thank Eli, Ralph, and Drew, and I'll see you next week.
Got it.
Thank you.